New CDPR approved characters you probably missed, Edgerunners secrets aplenty, Cyberpunk 2's location decoded using a blueprint from the 80s, and how every comic, show, and novel in the 2077 universe is connected. Let's go. If you're a Witcher fan, you're gonna love this secret. Towards the ending of Phantom Liberty, if you've taken the path that leads to the Killing Moon, you'll end up at Night City's NCX spaceport. Upon getting captured, you can divert off the main path to find a room with a shard and an urn. But this is not any old shard, it's labeled The Last Wish, the title of a short story written by Andrzej Sapkowski, in a series of short stories with the same title. Here's a picture of Sapkowski thrilled. Here's Mr. Sapkowski not so thrilled. Looks like we have the same emotional range, Sapkowski. Now in The Last Wish, Dandelion, a poet and friend of Witcher Geralt, opens a vase releasing a genie who attacks him. Geralt rushes him to Rind, the nearest city, but with medical aid not available until the next day, and with only one spellcaster in Rind, the duo must wait it out, which leads to Geralt meeting Yennefer for the first time. Ever since we professed our love to each other up at the very top with a view of the whole world, I knew right then and there that nothing could separate us except death. If you're reading this letter, it means that my time has finally come. My final wish is that you take my ashes to the moon and scatter them from the highest peak, as you gaze at the stars and think of me. Why? The implication here is that Y is Yennefer. It almost makes you want to shed a tear. Team Triss, by the way. The samurai demon has become pretty iconic and synonymous with Cyberpunk 2077 for its unique take on either a yokai or a Hanya mask. But there's probably a few things on this jacket that you never knew the meaning behind. The samurai jacket and all of 2077's clothing and fashion fall within the four main visual styles of entropism, kitsch, neo-kitsch, and neo-militarism, and is a core framework for CDPR's dystopian vision of Mike Pondsmith's universe, from architecture to interiors, laptops to street terminals, beds, switches, alarms, paneling, and even road barriers. And these visual styles are not just for variety and visual flair, they're intimately connected to the timeline and emerged through necessity or desire at certain points in history. So back to the lovely samurai jacket where you might have spotted the text running down the side here. But what is a crystal jock? Well, this actually comes from the golden era cyberpunk novel Hardwired by Walter John Williams. Hardwired was such an influence to Mike Pondsmith in the creation of the Cyberpunk 2020 world that a non-canon Hardwired sourcebook was also created, co-authored by the man himself, Walter John Williams. Hardwired's world pins orbital corporations against buttonheads, dirt girls, dirt boys, and you guessed it, crystal jocks. Crystal jocks are more akin to the hackers in our day and age, brute forcing passwords, using apps and exploiting vulnerabilities mostly in meat space versus the typical alternate reality cyberspace a lot of popular cyberpunk portrays. If you want a comparison, think breach protocol versus sticking a plug into your skull. So in essence, the crystal jockey patch is an homage to the hackers who use more rudimentary methods. There's also the Night City Heat pin, of course an homage to the Miami Heat, but also highlighting the destruction of Arasaka Towers. Now if you are a fashion fiend, there are a variety of crystal jock bombers, including the Edge Warrior, the Thermoset Hybrid, the Blue Mirror, the Rocker's Heart, Johnny's Replica, the Aramid Weave, and my personal favorite, the knockoff Samurai, for fans of Jimmy Silverham and Kenny Eurodollar. Yeah, that sounds about right. Speaking of style, if you've gotten a hand on XOXO, a 2077 comic book highlighting a love story between rivaling gangs, drawn by the very talented Jakub Rebelka, who is also the tarot card artist, and written by Bartosz Tibor, you might have noticed that one of our Edgerunners Chooms makes a little cameo, helping our main male strummer, Screw, indulge in a wee bit of cathartic masochism, agreeing to an implant procedure without using anesthesia. So why was our homie not in 2077? Something actually did happen to him according to Stibor, not giving much away and clarifying that this story takes place before Edgerunners. That being said, if you look at his voice actor, he does kinda make an appearance in a roundabout way. The Doc's voice actor is the same one who voices Slider from the Phantom Liberty expansion. It totally makes sense now, Slider was one of my favorites, and the Doc was one of my favorites. Hands down some of the funniest lines in the game and the show.
Keep your eyes on him, Reed. I am blind, not deaf.
Speaking of that, the Cyberpunk 2077 IP is filled with hidden character crossovers, so I've compiled every single one for you guys. In Blackout, you follow BD technician Arturo tasked with fixing faulty braindance reads and cartridges for DMS, aka Diverse Media Systems. Big City Dreams, a separate story which won a Hugo Award, highlights the Annihilate brain dance, a sim following a tribal warrior as he carves his way to the top of kingship. It's the ultimate power fantasy come to life. There's a little crossover here in that a faulty Annihilate cartridge is fixed by Arturo in Blackout. Cool little tie-in. In the heist from the events of 2077, we get front row seats to the murder of Saburo Arasaka. And during the climax of Blackout, this panel shows a lower thirds ticker highlighting the breaking news that Saburo has been found dead, putting the events of Blackout within the same time frame as the heist. Now, we never really experience a Blackout in the game, as Arturo does in the beginning of the comic, but as you will later find out when we talk about Cyberpunk 2's location, CDPR borrows heavily from the genre, and the Blackout was actually an event in the Blade Runner universe, although a bit more destructive than the blackouts and outages in Night City. Your Voice is a comic released alongside 2077 and features mercenary Yishin Ri, who you can actually speak to right here in the Atlantis bar. This one is super easy to miss, but we have Cormac, a fixer shown in this panel in Edgerunners, present in Blackout in this panel, and playing a larger role in You Have My Word, a completely separate comic. In You Have My Word, a comic following Teresa, an older Valentino on her path of revenge, you'll come across this scene that shows Mirek caught by Teresa taking a piss in the back alley, proving that you can't even whip your wang out in peace in Night City. Whipping out your wang, as we've seen twice, is just asking for trouble. Can't really blame Mirek here, he went into the back alley, but what did this guy think he was doing? Go hide behind something like the rest of us, dude. Here's a little secret, if you have a vehicle, open both of your doors. The more you know. We already talked a bit about XOXO, and there are a few notable features here as well. Caliber is a new one. She pops up and is introduced as the leader of the Maelstrom, but before Brick and before Royce. Dino is also a staple in this one as well. The Kickdown comics feature Falco and Fixer Mumar, Regina can be seen in Psycho Squad, and Vic can be seen in You Have My Word. There's a really cool one that ties into the plot of the game in You Have My Word again. As you might have guessed, this is a reference to V getting shot by Dex at the No-Tell Motel. Obviously, this helps us place You Have My Word in the timeline. Now let's not forget about the novels and short stories where in 2 AM She Calls, Padre is an integral character, and Delamain is referenced as replacing combat cab drivers in Night City. No Coincidence has a more subtle nod to Edgerunners, calling out what sounds like the accident David was in an early Edgerunners episode, and of course featuring Dum Dum. Let You Down and the music video for the Edgerunners outro features the crew before they had Lucy and later David, and the Edgerunners show itself of course has Rogue and Claire. This binds all the media together and makes the world feel like one cohesive organic ecosystem. These two, Trauma Team and Where's Johnny, they don't have any, likely because they were some of the first comics to be released, and Ten of Swords I didn't include because it's obviously Songbird and Reed, but if you have any connections that I might have missed, I'd love to hear about them as well, so drop them in the comments and let your fellow Chooms know where to look. I'm pretty sure most of you guys missed this one, but Rebecca, fan favorite from Edgerunners and the main character in the new Edgerunners Madness graphic novel, has some pretty unique tattoos that you probably just chalked up to a cool design. They're actually homages to sci-fi greats. On her thigh, in blocky, hard-to-read font, spells Philip Kindred Dick, authored of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the novel that Blade Runner was loosely based on. Sci-fi surrealism owes K. Dick a ton. He is one of the all-time greats and wrote novels like The Man in the High Castle, Valis, Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, A Scanner Darkly, Ubik, Vangelis, and a slew of short stories.
Wow!
A ton of his work has been adapted or readapted into cyberpunk or cyberpunk-adjacent films, and that includes Minority Report, Total Recall, A Scanner Darkly, and of course Blade Runner. He is considered one of the most important figures in 20th century science fiction, and his books have had a large influence on 2077 and some of the more obscure concepts. But that's not all, there's this beast tattoo on her stomach, and that's another homage, this time the logo for Shadowrun, a science fantasy tabletop role-playing game that combines genres of cyberpunk, urban fantasy, and crime with some occasional elements of conspiracy, horror, and detective fiction. Are you bored of the same old characters? Well, while we wait for Edgerunners 2, let's go over a few new ones that you probably missed. Now, Cyberpunk is an array of vibrant characters that span the original Art Talsorian sourcebooks, CDPR's game, comics, novels, shows, and you've seen that from the transmedia synergy. CDPR is very careful that all these characters fit into the canon and make sense in the world. There was a whole CDPR podcast with BizDev where they pretty much said that they are very particular about their collaborations. But these are CDPR sanctioned characters which could show up down the line. These characters come from the Gangs of Night City board game, an officially licensed board game in collaboration with CMON. I'm gonna pop them all on screen for you guys, but we have Steel, Fiery Misha, Terrence Cortez, Key AR, my personal favorite, Orange Hibiscus, Sodded, Cold Lena, James Udini, Fast Aria, Flo, and Deathwish or Nibbles. I'm gonna save that last one. There is a very strong, interesting conspiracy theory associated with Nibbles. But other than these characters, every other character in the Gangs of Night City game is already in Cyberpunk 2077. So it might just be a matter of time before we see these characters again. In fact, towards the end of the video, I have some proof that we saw Edgerunners 2 as a concept quite a while ago, and you can actually see it in game. Cut content is always a little bit of a sore spot, whether it was due to resource constraints or a different direction entirely, but these next 4.5 pieces of cut content are pretty cool and I would love to see them at some point. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the projectile launch system, a piece of cyberware that was notoriously buggy in early variations of the game, and one that seemed a little bit underloved, at least initially. Well, it seems we could have had another variation of that, and it looks like it went pretty far into development. The railgun was more of an energy-based concept weapon with a lot of overlap of what we got on release. Not only that, but the projectile launch system itself also went through a few iterations. And at some point it did use a ninja star as a projectile, which might have functioned more like a crossbow than an explosive. Another piece of cut content for y'all to munch on is this Dogtown bot, a mobile holographic ad that was going to be used specifically in Dogtown. This would have been walking around Dogtown promoting the black market and some of the illicit weapons, cyberware, and BDs within. My favorite of the bunch is this Arasaka equivalent to the Militech Chimera from Phantom Liberty, also scrapped in favor of Militech's hulking metal behemoth instead. Now I don't have to tell you that the Chimera is heavily influenced by Ghost in the Shell, but the Arasaka variant draws more inspiration from a variation of this design, used mainly in the Ghost in the Shell manga and TV series. These are called Tachikomas, a friendlier and quirkier version, but with more of a distinct arachnid silhouette. Anyways, this concept design was created by Furio, whose design portfolio features a lot of Cyberpunk 2077 concepts, some used, some unused. Songbird's cyberware design is largely thanks to Furio's work, and if you know anything about CDPR, you know that they love to use contractors, especially in the design and prototyping stage, to get as many variations and options as possible before they take stock of their inventory and kind of like iron out that final direction. Furio also shared some of the unique abilities of the Arasaka Spiderbot, including a death ray, mini spiderbots, turrets mounted atop, and what it would look like at various stages of damage. The Chimera also went through a few iterations. This storyboard from the Chimera fight sequence, which was originally almost a one-to-one recreation of the Ghost in the Shell sequence from '95, included a few different abilities. Initially, it looked like CDPR wanted to use spiderbots throughout the world, including for the NCPD. This one was scrapped in favor of the Minotaurs and exoskeletons. Now obviously I ain't National Geographic, but little edumacation for ya. Spiders are arachnids and have 8 legs. 6 legs and you're a hexapod. Also, spiders can suck my— Okay, if you guys are OGs, you might remember this monowire feature, which sadly didn't make the final cut. The 2019 Deep Dive trailer showed off a unique way to trigger a hack, where you could use the garrote like a yo-yo and queue up breach protocol from afar. This monowire actually originates in Johnny Mnemonic, where it was used by this dude right here. Keanu is just synonymous with Cyberpunk. First he was Johnny Mnemonic, then he was Neo, then he was in A Scanner Darkly, which is pretty much Cyberpunk adjacent.
2 hemispheres of my brain are competing?
And of course now he's Johnny Silverhand. If you don't remember, A Scanner Darkly was based on a novel by our choom Philip K. Dick. And if you don't remember that was like 2 minutes ago, you probably have Alzheimer's. Go get that checked out.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Lucy Kushinada from Edgerunners uses something very similar to 2077's imagining of the original, and even has a reference in the perk tree. Added in 2.0, the monowire could apply hacks through relic perks, but it was never quite like what we saw back in the day. Now Lucy was also recently released as a cameo character in fighting game Guilty Gear, where the monowire is core to her moveset. Remember what I said about CDPR being very careful about their collaborations? Well, if you listen to the trailer, you might get a little bit of a lore tidbit, and there's even a hint in there that David might still be alive in some kind of way. I'm not giving you hope, I didn't say that, you didn't hear it from me. Go watch the trailer yourself and form your own opinion. Now, did you know that there are over 50 influencers and streamers featured in Cyberpunk 2077 and Cyberpunk Red? It's definitely one of the coolest things I've been a part of. You can find my Easter egg in the Cyberpunk Red core book on page 27. This is the Cyberpunk world's equivalent to YouTube, Garden Video. 10% revenue split in the age of Red kinda makes me appreciate what YouTube offers. Alongside myself is Last Known Meal, Mad Queen, Triple S, John the Wise, and others. CDPR community manager Amelia, also known as Lileia, is a core character in the story Black Dog, and Patrick K. Mills is a fixer. I can almost guarantee you didn't spot all of the big celebrities in 2077 either. We have Hideo Kojima as Braindance editor in Konpeki, Grimes as superstar Lizzy Wizzy, Sasha Grey as DJ Ash from Growl FM, Mike Pondsmith as of course Maximum Mike on Moral Rock, Ozob, a big Brazilian pop culture character by Ozgal, Marcini Winsky and Michael Kaczynski, BD vendors in Dogtown, which pays a little homage to CDPR's roots of selling bootlegged games. There are a ton of other influencers used as characters in the world, whether that's on ads or just for their likeness, and CDPR claims they used 80 employees for their likeness. Have you seen this poster in 2077? The fixer was actually an early concept ideation for Edgerunners. Luke Poller mentions on his ArtStation that, quote, I worked on some early elements of the Cyberpunk 2077 anime, which after a few more years became Cyberpunk Edgerunners on Netflix. Now looking back at this, knowing the context here, is it just me or is this reminiscent of the kid from the Edgerunners 2 reveal trailer? Binoculars and a camera seem like they would be somewhat interchangeable if we're talking about iterations from version to version, so it seems plausible that because Edgerunners was such a success, CDPR could have gone back and looked at early conceptualizations and some of the rationale behind all of this, and might have even pulled content and characters from these early prototypes. Only time will tell, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Chumi, your patience has been rewarded as now we get into the meat and potatoes and the detail I've been sitting on for a while. Now there's been a less talked about theory for a while now that Cyberpunk 2's setting could be the Plex, a megalopolis mentioned in quests and emails added within the latest patches. Just to get you guys up to speed, while Night City will be returning in the sequel, we'll also be visiting another city, a city that the IP's creator Mike Pondsmith has claimed to be akin to Chicago gone wrong. Deep diving into the lore and the history of the genre means we can add some really strong arguments for what the Plex is, beyond the descriptions added in the game thus far. The Plex, according to its description in Shards and emails from 2077, is, quote, made up of interconnected cities and stretches from Boston to the north all the way to Washington, D.C. to the south. This is kind of where it would sit on the map, and in reality, this is known as the Northeast Megalopolis, or the Boss Wash Corridor. Stay with me, I don't know this shit, I'm Canadian, alright? You'll remember from Phantom Liberty that Space Force 1 is en route to Washington. There's even concept art to show what Washington would look like drawn up for Phantom Liberty. In one specific ending, the main protagonist, V, can also find him or herself in Langley, at an NUSA medical facility. But beyond this, I've dug up so much more that is all pointing to one genre precursor as the template for this location. Here's a hint, Cyberpunk 2077's story and characters are uncannily similar to this. Like seriously, it's 90% mapped onto this story. Let's go over the evidence. First point of evidence, the Boston Metroplex is mentioned in the Cyberpunk 2020's Home of the Brave. In fact, the Boss Wash Megaplex is in the Rust Belt net region from 2020 and is a key city grid. The Rust Belt net region covers central and eastern US, and in 2020 was a near dictatorship policed heavily by Netwatch, the US provisional government, and the Euromarket Consortium. LDLs are long-distance links, which are in essence fast travel hubs within NetSpace and are located in Chicago, Boston, and Washington within the Rust Belt. Cool and convenient. Second, in Cyberpunk Red, it's mentioned that the United States government is still primarily centered in the Boston-Washington corridor. The Combined Operations Group, founded post-nuking of Arasaka Towers, is the remnants of the US military, combining ships, aircraft, infantry, and armor into a single battalion tasked with protecting the Boss Wash corridor from threats. During this time, Ziggurat also set up connections in, quote, North American metroplexes. Third, Nightcorp, as seen in 2077, is rebuilding the destroyed maglev that will allow you to travel to Chicago. This is a project that's aiming to be opened in 2080. Low-hanging fruit here as Nightcorp took a backseat in the story, but is incredibly important to the subtext of the Rogue AIs, the Alpha Centauri plotline, which again is almost a one-to-one in terms of the plot to a specific trilogy that began back in 1984. Taking a look at Cyberpunk 2020 in the NC sourcebook, there's also a description of the transcontinental maglev. And yes, there are connections to Atlanta and Washington, D.C. So now that we have all of that established, this is where we bring in the father of Cyberpunk, William Gibson. You see, if you've read Neuromancer and the Sprawl trilogy, you'd realize that Cyberpunk 2077 might as well be called Neuromancer the game, with the amount of influence it's had on CDPR's direction for 2077. If you don't believe me, let me draw a few parallels. In Count Zero, the sequel to Neuromancer, there is an African diaspora group that believes in voodoo AI entities in cyberspace, called the Loa. Very similar, if not essentially the same as the Voodoo Boys, which actually were CDPR's readaptation of a gang of frat boys from the 2020 universe. So that's more of CDPR's creation versus Mike Pondsmith's. Here's another one, SimStim. It's essentially Braindance, living out the sensory experience and extravagance of recorded memories from superstars, celebrities, and action heroes. Mr. Blue Eyes? You ever heard of him? He is essentially Armitage. The novel even mentions his blue eyes multiple times and makes it very clear that he's being manipulated by an AI. Which gives some insight into the path we'll see Mr. Blue Eyes go down if he returns. Lady 3 Jane is essentially Hanako from Tessir Ashpool. Freeside, an orbital luxury destination, is effectively the Crystal Palace. Just look at how similar this Neuromancer art piece for a recent hardcover release maps onto the concept art of the Crystal Palace from CDPR. And yeah, there's a heist in Neuromancer, much like in a specific ending in 2077. 2077 is also a love letter to other famous genre greats. Cynosure is modeled after Akira's core. Corpo Center is really just the same as Ghost in the Shells. The Yaiba Kusanagi, an Akira bike named after Ghost in the Shell's protagonist. The Matrix has a ton of Easter eggs too, the deja vu cats, the red and blue lighting in main areas, and even the pill scene replicated here. Off-world colonies and the experiments in No Coincidence are very similar to Blade Runner's replicants. Johnny Mnemonic has external memory databanks. An Easter egg to that is this ad here, and the fact that one of the Castle twins keeps his own external memories and databanks. There are constructs in the Sprawl trilogy, there are soul snatchers in Mona Lisa Overdrive, and plot twist, Johnny Mnemonic is actually part of the Sprawl universe. No word of a lie, there are tons more. I could go on, and I will in a future video, but you get the point I'm trying to make. With each decision CDPR is making, they're using at the very least a lot of influence from these genre stars, and at the most are effectively one-to-one recreation. The Sprawl trilogy popularized the genre, so it would make sense that the Plex is essentially a recreation of the location of the Sprawl, also known as the Boston-Atlanta Metropolitan Axis. The only other city with as much clout as the Sprawl in the Gibson universe is Chiba, and Chiba 11 already exists in the 2020 universe, so again, striking similarities. It slots within the same area. CDPR has proven that they're not shy about replicating things, and it's already been set up, baby. You want more receipts, do you? Okay, here's another layer. CDPR has also recently moved to Boston to work on Cyberpunk 2. Boston is an interesting location, seeing as CDPR had a studio in LA already, but it makes even more sense that they want to immerse the devs in the right environment and help the sequel be more authentic. Throw in the next leg of the ARG involving the NUSA, the Black Wall, and Kurt Hansen potentially still being alive, and it's giving something very similar to Armitage. If you are at all interested in the above, I recommend you check out my in-universe video on the Black Wall and the Rogue AIs. It will answer a lot of your questions, and maybe even leave you with some new ones. Click the link above and you'll be handed off to the Parallel Universe Neon. I'll see you there.